Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stephen King podcast. This is bonus episode number 41, and today I have with me author Jenna Greene. Hello, Jenna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. And why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what kind of writing you do?
Okay, I am a author from Southern Alberta and a teacher, and I write YA fantasy, although I will soon be branching out into children's books, but that's coming ahead. So primarily, I am a YA fantasy author, and yeah.
Okay. And were you always a writer, or did you always have that aspiration, or is this something that came to you later?
No, it's always been there. I think, if you asked me when I was like 7, what do you want to be when you grow up? A writer and a fairy princess. And then later, what do you want to be? Oh, a teacher and a writer, or a doctor and a writer. Like, it was always there.
Okay.
It never left.
Well, that's good. And did you write a lot when you were younger?
I did. They were probably not good.
Right.
But yeah, I always had a little notebook, be writing some sort of adventure. I tried to be a poet for a very long time, and I am not meant to be a poet, but always, trying out different styles and genres and creating stories.
Right. And as one of the maxims of writers, you have to read a lot. So I assume you were an avid reader as well?
Absolutely. Although, ironically, I was actually a struggling reader when I was really little. I mean, I have a really late birthday, so I was 5 in grade 1 when everyone else was 6, and it took a few years to kind of figure out how to read.
Okay. And
then once I figured it out, then I was an advanced reader, and my parents were like, "You are a very confusing person." And then, always reading. My mom really modeled that for us. Sister was a big reader. My dad's not a big reader, and neither's my husband. So I'm perpetually surrounded by people that either absolutely adore reading or don't read at all. Right. There's no one in the middle in my life.
Okay. So sounds like you were a late, early bloomer.
Yes.
All right. And what kind of reading did you like to read? Or who were some of your favorite authors or genres?
Well, I remember when I was really little, I was struggling to read. And what really got me into reading was my She-Ra Princess of Power picture books, because who doesn't love She-Ra? And then when I grew up, in the 80s and stuff, the literature wasn't maybe as rich as it is now. So, you read The Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley Twins and the Fear Street books.
Okay.
But then once I got into maybe like high school, then the literature back then really blossomed, and I would read everything from nonfiction to a classic to anything I could get my hands on.
Okay. And what are some of your favorites?
Pride and Prejudice in 1984, which everyone marvels at because one is like a idealistic romance and the other is a dystopian tragedy. I'm like, those are my two moods, I guess.
Yeah. And so what is it about those two books that appeal to you?
I think with Pride and Prejudice, it's definitely the characters. Very strong character. And with 1984, I'd never read anything like that ever in my life. Okay. I had never, ever come across a dystopian world. I'd never come across the tragic ending. That book is a classic for a reason. 1984 is phenomenal in its creativity and its genius and its commentary and its themes. And it's dark and horrific, but wow, that's some good writing.
Yes, and it seems more relevant today than ever with social media.
And that's what they said, when it first came out. And every 20 years, they're same with The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Yes. Like every decade or so, people are like, wow, this thing really connects with today. And that's what good literature can do. It's just very deep. Yes.
As you touched upon it, that's the appeal of literature too, is the broadness of it, is because some stories, like you're just really drawn into the characters. You can relate to them. Those types of stories usually address universal human conditions that we all go through. And then you have the idea stories like 1984 that just blow you away with the implications of, if something is taken to the nth degree, how could it change the world. And again, I have to peg social media as something that's really formed a lot of the public opinion nowadays. And nothing is more better example today than with COVID and the vaccinations. It's interesting that people will Like it's on one hand, technology is amazing because you've got like this ability for us to produce this vaccine in such a short time. But then you have the social sciences where it have clouded people's minds, and you have people that won't take the vaccine. It's just mind blowing. So it's
there's a meme that I repost every once in a while where it's like, well, I don't know what to do. All these scientists and doctors and nurses and professionals tell me I should get the vaccine, but this one guy who failed science in high school told me not to. So I really don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that just epitomizes the downfall of social media.
Yes. Yeah. And the double-edged sword of technology for sure. And I don't know if that's something that, because you picked those two books, so maybe that's something that you subconsciously work into your books as well. But I guess we'll find out in a little bit once we start to dive into that. But before we get there, I'd just like to find out about your creative path in terms of writing. Did you take any formal courses in writing and that, or is this was something that you just did more organically on the side?
I don't have any classes in writing. I have an English degree.
Okay.
So I've definitely studied literature. Mm-hmm. But with the writing part of it, that's all hands-on in the trenches.
Right.
Started back before the internet, mm-hmm. When I was a teenager, sending submissions in with my self-addressed stamped envelope and my...
yes.
And going to the library and looking at their reference material on them. The marketing guide mm-hmm. where you can send submissions. And it's interesting because had I started later, it would have been easier.
Right.
But then I wouldn't, because then the internet will swing and mm-hmm. you've got all that information. But I also wouldn't have known what to ask. I wouldn't have known what to look for online.
Right.
Right. And so I don't know. I mean, I can't go back and fix it anyway. But mm-hmm. I mean, I started way back when and very slow and learning and making far too many mistakes. Mm-hmm. And then just the writing developed by writing, just practicing and trying and getting better and then getting worse a little bit and then getting better again.
Right. So you went through, what is it, the 100,000 words exercise before you become a good writer?
Yeah, I did it a few times.
Okay. So then, because you're pre-internet and that, did you seek out like writing groups or anything like that? Or was that something that was available to you? Or
there definitely are writing groups in Lethbridge, and mm-hmm. I've definitely gone and spoken to them and done presentations, and they've given me advice on maybe marketing and some conferences to go to. But mm-hmm. the most help I've got from my writing is through my editors.
Okay.
They are the ones that really teach me. This is why we're taking this out, or this is why you don't need this, or mm-hmm. I have a really good editor, and I've had some good publishers that are also my editors, and that's how I really learn and develop. And then every time I write a book now, I'm so much better that my editor's job gets easier.
Right.
And so they can teach me even more because they have that time.
Right.
And that's where I really grow as a writer, is through that process.
I see. And so it sounds like then that you were sending your manuscripts out to various publishers and whatnot, and eventually somebody took an interest in one of them?
That's right. I've tried to have an agent. That's just never been in the cards. But I have two different publishers, mm-hmm. one that publishes my Imagine series and one that publishes the Reborn Marks series. And just sometimes publishers are open to, they call it unsolicited submissions. And, mm-hmm. I spent 5-6 years just investigating those online. And then someone looked at my stuff and said, this is good. We'll publish it.
Okay. And what writing tools do you use? Are you familiar with Scrivener, or are you a Word person, or like what do you do? Do you write hand notes or?
I am strictly Word.
Okay.
I do have some notebooks, but those are, because I write fantasy, there's a lot of world building, and I'm always mm-hmm. terrified of like what a character, especially if it's a minor character, what they look like or how they speak or where they're from. And so I have a lot of notebooks where I'm tracking magic systems and characters and locations and things. Although I'm starting to collect that online. So I'm changing that a little bit, but a lot of it just is in my head. I'm very simplistic. All I need is mm-hmm. a Word document. I can't really write by hand because my brain goes so much faster than my hand. Mm-hmm. I'm a very fast typer though, so I can keep up with my thoughts. But that's the thing about writing, is that I can't write by hand. My thoughts would be mm-hmm. 6 chapters later and I'd still be writing. The boy was at the park.
Right.
I'd be like,
Have you ever tried narrating your books?
Yeah, but honestly, I type really fast, and everyone's always like, how do you type so fast? I'm like, write a book. You will learn to type fast.
Right.
I don't even know what my it's probably like 70, 80 words per minute. But
Okay.
I don't even have to look at the keyboard. That's what works for me. And everyone's different. I know lots of people that use Scrivener, like tons.
Right. Yeah. Every writer that comes on for interview, the process is different. So it's truly not, there's no one size that fits all. There's no silver bullet to writing a book. You just have to find what works for you and make it work.
Yeah, I'm very unique in like the length of time I write. Most writers, they find like a 3 hour chunk of time and they sit down and write. And I don't think I could sit still for 3 minutes. I think my back would hurt. I think I'd get thirsty or bored. I'll just daydream up a scene or a chapter. I'll sit down, I'll write it 45 minutes, an hour, and then I'll do that 2 or 3 times a day. But I'm not going to sit for it. And that's what most people do. They're like, how do you write for 20 minutes? They're like, it takes us 20 minutes to kind of get into the groove. I'm like, because my groove's going to vanish after about, an hour. That groove is gone. Right. So
yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. And you don't have interruptions then when you're doing that? Like that's if you have that time blocked out and it's over such a span, I would think that you'd be prone to interruptions from the outside world.
Well, that's the thing, right? I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, so I'm never going to have 4 hours to sit and write.
Okay.
I can put my kid to bed, finish my marking, and then I can have half an hour before it's bedtime. That's easy to do, right? Or I can put Paw Patrol on for 20 minutes and see what I can get done. So it's what works for me. And I know I'm very different than others, but that really doesn't bother me because, and sometimes it's quality versus quantity. I could sit and write for 3 hours, but I bet you the last 10 pages of it will be crap.
Okay. That's an interesting process. I've never heard that before, but like you said, whatever works for you. So that's interesting. Has your process changed at all once you got a editor, or are you more efficient at it just through the doing of it over and over, or has an editor really helped you hone your craft?
I'm far, far, far more efficient. There's a lot of things that now come naturally, whereas before I had to really think about pacing or characterization or my dialogue tags. And I'm far more ruthless now. I used to want to keep everything. And they'd be like, well, you don't need this because you already said it. And I'm like, but that sentence is so pretty.
Yes.
And they're like, you don't need it. I'm like, but it's pretty.
Yeah.
Now though, I have more confidence now that I can write a good sentence again. I think my fear when I was first going is that I'd write this brilliant paragraph and someone would say, you don't need it. So I'd cut it out. But then we'd be like, oh, you do need something here. And I'd be like, well, I can't do that again. I don't know how, it took forever to write that good paragraph. It was magic and I don't know how to do that again. But now I think I'm confident that if I cut a line or a paragraph or even a chapter, and if we need to add some stuff in, I have the confidence now to know that I can write something good again.
Right.
And so now I'm very ruthless with editing. I'm like, any word that I'm like, no, out. Sentences out, paragraphs out, nope, don't need it, do. And I was bad before. I used to have a separate document for everything that I cut out. So if I cut out a paragraph, I would copy it and paste it into like the edit document just in case.
Yeah.
So it was never really gone.
Right.
That's how bad I used to be.
Right. Do you think when you were earlier in your writing, do you think you were over explaining things? Because I believe that's a common mistake that beginning writers do, is that they don't trust the readers to be able to fill in the gaps sometimes.
Yes, I thought we had to explain, like, especially with setting, I thought we had to explain absolutely everything, what it smelled like, what it looked like, what it tasted like, what they were touching, who was nearby. And then they're like, well, nobody cares, right? Or there's times to explain that stuff and there's times not.
Right.
Yeah, you explain that when you first arrive at a location. You don't explain it in the middle of a battle scene. Nobody cares what the wind was like, unless it blows your hair in your face and then you can't see and then a sword comes at you. Then you might want to know what the wind looks like, but nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't know about word counts. My first novel I submitted was 120,000 words.
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, YA is usually like 60. I was like, what?
Ooh,
they're like,
well, you got 2 books.
word count standards. I'm like, what's a word count standard?
Yeah.
Like, honestly,
I
probably should have taken some writing classes or something, but I just, I was a teacher.
Yeah.
Teachers don't have a lot of spare time.
Right.
And my Imagine book, the very first draft of that, I wrote in my second year of university. So it's not like, right? Like I was already in school and working, so it's no more time.
Right. Right. So I'm curious then, given your writing method, your writing series. So how do you how involved are you in the conception of a series? Do you have it plotted out from the first book to last, or is it just I've got the first book and I'll just leave a hook and we'll see where it goes from there? Like, where are you in that spectrum?
The answer is yes. So I have, the Imagine series where the first draft was written in my very early 20s when I was in university, and then got rewritten 3 or 4 times before it got published.
Right.
And with that book, I knew the beginning of that first book, and I knew the end, and I knew most of the midpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I expanded into a series, but with the Reborn Marks series, that one I knew maybe not every plot point, because I'm a bit of a plantser. I'm half plotter, half pantser.
Right.
I kind of plan out the beginning of the book, the end of the book, and I don't know what happens in the middle.
Right.
But this series, I knew where it was going. But then on the other hand, I'm starting a new series, and I'm just seeing where it takes me. So I'm like the worst person to ask that question to, because the answer is, it's like, do you plan it or no? Yes.
Yes.
Do you I don't know, the muse does it.
Right.
And sometimes it tells me and sometimes it doesn't.
Okay. So you sort of just go with the flow depending on the project, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. And every project's a little bit different.
Right.
Some of them are very planned out and some of them aren't. I don't know. My fairy godmother muse must be like half drunk half the time, and she's like, this time I'm gonna tell you everything. The next time you gotta earn it. Right. I'm not the best person to ask about process and stuff, because I'm just so different than so many people. But it is reassuring to people that when they're like, well, everybody I know writes like this and I don't. Okay.
Yeah.
If it works for you, it works for you.
Absolutely. All right. So let's then turn to your Reborn series, which is your latest series that you're working on. And why don't you give us a 50,000-foot overview of what that series is about?
Sure. So the first book in the series is called Reborn, and it's about a girl named Lexel, and she's 16. And the story opens and she's being sold into slavery. She has 7 marks on her skin, and these are known as memory marks. And the theory is that if you have these marks on your skin, you have lived previous lives.
Okay.
And so then there are once-borns who don't have those marks, and they have not lived previous lives. So because she's had this privilege of living before, she's sold into slavery and she's in service now to these once-borns. Now, in the first book, we really explore whether that's really true. Is this just an excuse to get free slaves?
Okay.
Is it an excuse to oppress a bunch of people? Or is there some truth to this? Does she have a connection to the past?
Okay.
And then through the course of the first book, while we're exploring that, she's trying to rescue a very young girl, a girl named Sarah, who's about 5 years old. And she's a slave as well, but she's in a very precarious situation. So they run away. So they've got Sarah and a boy named Finn and Lexel, and they're running away and trying to get this girl to safety.
Okay.
And then as they go along, they're trying to figure out what's true and what's not true about the world.
Okay. And is this fantasy or science fiction or?
Yeah, it's what's known as it's kind of that lower fantasy, that dystopian fantasy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's the first book. And right now your second book is out, or is it coming out?
Yeah, it's been out about a month.
Okay.
And so in the second book, Lexel has reached a place of relative safety.
Okay.
And, that sounds great, except nothing's perfect. She thinks she's reached this place that's completely safe and fine, but there's no such thing as utopia. So this place has problems of its own. But honestly, she's not be in slavery right now, but everyone else still is back where she's from. And so she's really got to juggle the question of what can she live with conscience-wise? What is she willing to give up? Because, going back to help everyone, that's going to be a big sacrifice. And then, of course, there's all sorts of new factors, new dangers, new hazards, right? Old characters return and their perspective may have changed. Living in this new place, Lexel's going to be exposed to new ideas and all sorts of things. And then the second book really, I call it the Empire Strikes Back of the series, in that it really moves everything forward for book 3, which will be the final book, where now we're starting to make some changes in society to fix this problem.
Okay, so this is a trilogy, and
it is.
And does Lexel, if this is too spoilery to just say so, but does she have any like superhuman abilities or anything like that, or is she it's just these 7 marks which she bears? And I assume there's some backstory behind where these marks originated from.
Well, in the first book, we do really discover that there is some truth to this reborn myth.
Okay.
And that she does have some connections to the past. And so it gives her the ability to hear what are known as whispers of the past.
Okay.
So she can hear these versus other people that aren't reborns. They can't, right? So there's an advantage that way. Okay. But as a character, she's very unique. She's not your typical fantasy character who has superhuman bow shooting ability or can run the fastest or is the most brave of any person you've ever met.
Okay.
Or she is ordinary, but her character traits that really set her apart is that she's kind, she's empathetic, she's perceptive, and at times, those are her downfall. And at the rest of the time, it makes her superior to those around her.
Okay.
So she's a very unique character in that she grows so much. She gets so much strength, but she's not this superhuman powerhouse.
Okay.
She's very relatable.
Okay. And these marks, since this is dealing with the theme of slavery, that there are more people with the marks than without?
Well, yes. So you've got that upper class elite, once born, no marks people. And then you have a large chunk of the population where, and then you also have, so the character of Finn, he's what's known as a double born. And he has no marks, but he's a twin, right? And so he's kind of that middle class in that, like, he's the extra.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So as the first book and even the series expands, you learn about even these subclasses, right? There's going to be classes within slaves, right?
Okay.
The more privileged slaves versus, and it's very allegorical to slavery around the world, right? Where people are scrambling with whatever power they can get within their oppressed systems.
Okay. So you mentioned Finn is a twin. Who's his partner? Or is that a spoiler?
We don't meet his twin till book 3. And so since that one's not out yet, I don't want to give any spoilers away.
Cool. And is the level of or subcultures slavery, is it based on the number of marks that a person bears, or is it something else?
No, and Lexel's pretty unique in that most people have a lot more and they usually develop a lot younger. So there's the question throughout the series of why they develop so late with her and why there's so few. But that is cleared up in book 3.
Okay.
So it's kind of a long wait on that one. But yeah, we definitely do find out eventually.
Oh, it sounds very intriguing. It's definitely a unique concept, one that I'm not familiar with in any other series. So kudos to you for coming up with a unique idea.
Oh, thank you. And I know I'm talking about like thematic things and character development, but there's a lot of action and adventure in it too.
Okay.
There's all sorts of creatures that she meets that you would never expect, and dangers and hazards, and still very fast-paced.
Right. And I see references to the wastelands. Is that a large part of the setting of the book? Or are there other areas that are, I guess just, I don't know what you would call them, but they're not wastelands?
From Anstator, and that's the main world. That's where she's a slave. To get away from slavery, to flee. They're trying to get to the unclaimed cities where slavery is not in existence. But to get there, they have to go through the wastelands, which is somewhere nobody wants to be ever.
Okay.
And that's where all the trouble happens, right? So you want to earn your freedom. There's some trouble coming. So that's the big, the middle chunk of the novel, and the big, how do we get through this place? It's literally the wastelands. There's nothing there. There's not people, and the people that you meet, you don't want to meet. And there's creatures there that no one's going to protect you from. And how are you going to endure, and how are you going to survive, and how are you going to get through this horrible place?
Right.
And you don't even know where you're trying to, you know where you're trying to get to, but you don't know how to get there.
Okay, so book 2 is out right now, and that is Renew. And I assume you're working on book 3 right now?
Book 3, first draft is done. First round of edits are done. And of course, anyone that's a writer knows there's like 9 more rounds of edits still to go, but it is further along than Renew was when Reborn came out. So readers won't have to wait quite as long between book 2 and 3 as they did between book 1 and 2.
Okay. And what's the tentative release date for book 3?
I don't think we have that yet, but we do have a title, and it's going to be called Restore.
Ah, well, that definitely sounds intriguing. For your Imagine series, which came out prior to this series, correct?
Right.
Is that series complete?
It is not.
Oh.
It was supposed to be 3 books, but it looks like it's going to be 4. So I have to find some time eventually to pen the 4th and final book. I've got some notes on it. I've got a few chapters written, but I've learned that I need to finish one series before I start another, because apparently I can't write 2 series at a time. And so, that books, and yep, I will get on writing that. Okay. It's on my to-do list.
All right. And why don't you just give us a quick overview of what that series is about?
So still fantasy, but very different fantasy.
Okay.
It is kind of what you would know as high fantasy. So lots of magic and elves and dwarves and things like that. But it starts with 2 girls from Earth. One is named Kat. She's 15. And a girl named Becky, and she's 10. And they're taken from Earth to Orin, a totally new world. And basically, they're just abandoned. They're told, hey, you have a role to play in saving this world. Peace out. And, okay. And so, they go through a lot of struggles even getting somewhere. And then, okay, we have these powers. How do they work? Oh, that's not how they work. That's bad. Oh, ouch. And then the reality that you are in a foreign land, that takes a long time for them to really grasp. I mean, it's one thing to know about knights and dragons if you come from a world with knights and dragons, but if you come from like here, it's huge mind blown kind of concept. Right. So, and they make a lot of mistakes just because they don't know the land. Like, oh, I shouldn't touch that shrub. It's poisonous. Looked like a tree to me.
All right. Okay. And what are their roles on this world then, or what's the arc of the series about?
Well, in the first book, it's very much about there's a villain and they have a magical inheritance. And they need to find the other connections. There's other people involved. They have to locate those people and combine their powers and defeat this villain. Easier said than done when you're from a different world and you have no idea what's going on. You have a name to go on and then a giant world to explore trying to find these people. A last name would be nice. But then as the series goes on, it's really a lot about magic itself and power and how it's used. And you have groups of people that pop up that are very like, all magic is evil all the time, and we're going to do everything to destroy you. So the first book versus the rest of the series, very the same, but different.
Okay.
Kind of those themes get extended in a whole different way.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you said this is going to be how many books in total?
It will eventually be 4. There's 3 out right now. And yes, I will get working on the 4th.
What part of the writing process do you enjoy the most? Is it do you like the revision process, or do you like the first draft more?
I love drafting. I love it so much. Editing, I am the grumpiest person in the world, especially the first round of edits. It gets a bit easier second, third, fourth draft, but the first round of edits, I am a giant grump, and nobody wants to be around me. And I try to work through them quickly, that first round of edits, and get them done within like a week or so because, man, I'm grumpy. But it does inspire a lot of cleaning of my house and a lot of creative TikTok videos because I'm trying to avoid editing. So it's both good and bad.
Right. But you do see that the end result is a better product.
Oh, yeah. And there's so much value in editing. I'm actually not too bad at it. I think as a teacher and, I have an English degree and have those skills, so that really helps me. But it's just not as much fun as drafting.
See, that's interesting because I know there are writers who just love the revision process because they just feel that's where they take the raw material and shape it into something really special. As you said, everybody's different.
I just find the progress is not as fast. I don't know. I do and I'm good at it, and there's value in it. I get annoyed and grumpy.
I see. Okay. And do you do the editing in like your 20-minute block kind of things, or is that a longer process time block for you?
Yeah, but there's more 20-minute blocks. I'll edit for 20 minutes 17 times a day just because I'm trying to get it done.
Right.
But also I edit more in the summer.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because I usually write a couple things during the year, and then in the summer I have a lot more time. So as a teacher, you get summers off. But yeah.
So you write through the day, so you don't find yourself more creative in the morning versus the afternoon kind of thing? Because I know some writers like to write in the morning and edit in the afternoon. Deal?
I kind of have to write and edit and do everything kind of at night. Like during the school year, I get up at 5:30. I can't get up any earlier to write. There would just be no point. I could just not go to bed, right? So, and then, you know, so during the school year versus summer, vastly different, right? During the school year, I get up, I work all day, I come home, I feed my kid, I put her to bed, I finish my marking, and then I'll write for half an hour to 45 minutes. Versus in the summer, where depending if she's at daycare or not, because I do send her a few days a week, then I can get started a lot earlier.
Right.
So it's very, to the year where it's vastly different.
But it's important that you mention that, like you said, you just like get maybe a half hour in or so every day, but there's value in that for anybody out there that wants to become a writer, that those half hours will add up to something that is a lot larger than what you thought you could accomplish.
That's right. And I'll bet you I write more than some people, right? Because they might get once a week when they have a 4-hour block versus 7 days a week where I can get 30 to 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's an important lesson for starting writers, is that, you know, 30 minutes every day is better than no minutes every day. So if that's all you can do, then 30 minutes is still pretty good. Even if it's 20 minutes, it's still of value. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Facebook group called the 10-Minute Novelists. And there's a woman that wrote a novel 10 minutes a day because she was a mom of however many, and that's all she could do. And there you go.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, so you've got these two series. It sounds like you're wrapping up the Reborn series, and the Imagine series is next on your plate. Is there any other projects that you're contemplating?
Well, I do have a picture book that's going to be coming out soon. I do not have a date on that yet, but it's getting very close to being done. I don't draw, I can't even trace a stick person. So I didn't do any of the illustrations, but I do have a picture book coming out. And then I wrote like a short story that's going to be an anthology that's coming out, I think, January or February. So there's stuff coming. I just don't have dates yet.
Right. Right. Okay. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that at this point that you would like to mention?
You didn't ask me if I'm a natural brunette, and I am.
My apologies.
So now people,
that should have been my first question.
It should have been. No, I think we covered lots of stuff. We're good.
All right. Where can people find your books?
So Amazon, Kindle, all the regular places. Just make sure that you know Greene is spelled with an E on the end. So Greene. Okay. And then that's also how you can find me online. Jenna Greene. J Greene Writes on Twitter. J Greene Writes on TikTok. Jenna Greene on Facebook. JennaGreene.ca is the website. So Greene with an E on the end is what you really have to remember.
All right. Very good. And you have an author website where people can go to as well?
Yeah. JennaGreene.ca, because I am Canadian.
Hey. Good day, eh? Same here. All right, Jenna. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on. I wish you all the best with your series and your picture books. And hopefully when your next project comes out, we'll hook up again and we can talk about it at that time.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right. It was great talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.